So, as witnessed by the very small hotel version of the altar of repose behind me, we are in the Great Silence. And it is interesting that we've chosen to sort of have our final gathering now in that silence, because the final gathering is going to, of necessity, be, so what do we do with this? What do we do now? Where do we go from here? And that's very much, although I think we're a little more positive about it, the questions that the disciples had in that great silence. And we can take a minute to reflect on that. And then with Reverend Hertz, we can talk about working out our own path, hopefully with less fear and trembling. Okay, are all the bars up at the top so that you can actually see?
I'm able to see the slide.
Okay. It's not giving me an inset, so I can't see you. This is interesting. Upgrades. So we're on the last slide, and let me just really give everybody headaches. So we're on chapter 11. We're on the last piece we've got here, which is, as Father Jim put it, Catholic identity in a pluralistic and a global society, which are somewhat two different things. Pluralistic is all the different ways we have to approach things within our society, which is significantly impacted by the fact that we are part of a global society in which people move around a whole lot more and share information a whole lot more than they used to, which is the piece that's the global society. And remembering that the ECC has changed and morphed from what Father Jim was writing about here too. Think about what we do in our masses. We actively pray for other spiritual paths as if they have legitimacy of their own, because they do. And we generally drink deeply of things like the universal Christ. And we have learned from the old Catholics that we try to model some of our practice on, that one community's needs is different than another community's needs, and that one person's needs is different than another person's needs. And the last point I wanted to point out is that he's not a tame lion, that telling God what box to sit in is never a good idea, and always about worshiping our own ego, not God. And then Father Jim talked a lot about differences in the church and how Catholics relate to the other churches. And we've actually, in our classes, done a pretty solid job of already talking about schisms and reformations, and we've hit on heresies and things like that. And so I've got in there in the writing that each version of the church has its own gift, and we don't need 6 left toes. And an analogy of this is that I have deep reverence and love for the Quakers. I love how they make decisions. In fact, it's how my order makes decisions, and it's how our congregation has agreed in a Quaker fashion to make decisions in a Quaker fashion. But I like liturgy. I wouldn't want to let go of the liturgy. I don't want to be a Quaker. But I value the contribution the Quakers have to the body. I don't want to be an Orthodox. I don't want to have everything a prescribed set of things that's kind of in its own little meditative chant, and usually said 3 times each. I love its beauty. I don't need to be that to appreciate it. And those are kind of examples of this idea that the churches have their charisms and their ways that they're trying to find this out. And I may come at that partly informed from how very many different groups of Franciscans there are, just by the way. I'm going to admit that to the Benedictines in the room. And when we're looking at our interaction with these, we generally say all baptisms are valid. That's almost true. All baptisms in the name of the parent, the Son, and the Holy Spirit we consider valid. We're not trying to pretend that one group's water and naming of the Trinity is different than another group's water and naming of the Trinity, and claiming that we're more valid than others. And this is an important thing to explain, because I've run across Protestants where apparently in some of those groups, you come into a new group and you get rebaptized. And so I have had people ask me, okay, so I'm joining this, so do I need to get rebaptized? Or with the assumption, when should I get rebaptized? And my brain said, clink. The only people that we would actually need to rebaptize are those who deny the Trinity. LDS baptism. What's the other big group? Adventists, I think. So there are big groups that do not adhere to the Trinity, and we would need to do a conditional baptism there. But we do have this interesting interaction with confirmations. And this has been another thing that's really been informing as I work with my congregation with the church drama, is that there are people who very much want to say, and I'm part of this now, and I want to ceremonially do a thing that I'm part of this now. And there are people who are like, I don't want another ceremony. I just want to do and be and live. And we've been having those conversations about what affirmations we can do. For technical terms, which appear anymore to only really relate to ordinations, we can accept the confirmations of the Episcopalians and the ELCA and I think the Methodists and various other groups that kind of hit a solid set of tenets. So we know that there's not a messy retraining issue that needs to be tackled. And Keta, anything that I blew on that part?
No, just keep going there.
Okay. All right. Father Jim has not understood Orthodox as much as he was saying. It's actually fairly clear. Monks have to be celibate. Only monks can be bishops. Bishops are therefore celibate. Parish priests have to be married. You will not be ordained without a wife. That is key to the ability to understand the congregation you're serving. It's just not done. It's part of the rules. And so you end up in this situation where parish priests are really secular priests who have families and have all those concerns just like their flock. And the bishops, instead of being senior priests, are senior monks who then, from that set apart way, can oversee the theology of the whole. But even that approach to theology, you think we're visceral. Cool. Orthodox drape everything in doing theology, living theology. You walk into an Orthodox home, you're going to see a beautiful corner that's tucked in usually within plain sight from the door. That's got icons. In fact, the training is that you're trying to become an icon. And the icons are not the object of devotion. They're the window through which you see the object of devotion. They're the doorway through which God reaches to us. And one of the coolest Orthodox reasonings is that teaching of becoming an iconostasis. And the deeper level of that is that reverence for Mary as the Christ bearer. The real goal is to become a Christ bearer, to bear Christ so thoroughly within us that our systems and Christ systems are so thoroughly integrated that we are like Mary, a Theotokos. So I wanted to kind of clarify that because there's some coolness in Orthodoxy that's not nearly as confusing as it sounded like when he was trying to dance on the surface. And then there's us. And I don't know if you've taken opportunity now that we do remote stuff to go observe each other's worship practice. You're going to find congregations among us that look really Roman. You're going to find congregations among us that look really Episcopalian. And you're going to find congregations among us that look really New Age in some ways. And most of us are somewhere in between those. And so there's no sense of an orthodoxy of practice in the ECC. We talk about liturgy and we have to go gently because everybody's got big ouchy toes because we're so invested in the way that we do it. And we each do it differently for our communities, which again is that alt Catholic thing. So really, really, I really mean it. We don't do anything all the same way. We don't have to. And think about what we were talking about with these other spiritual paths. And what we tend to go to is the fruits of the Spirit. If we see you living and doing God, we're pretty okay with that. And so the way that the catechism is, well, you know, these people, they still have the opportunity to know God. They have the opportunity to know God in their own path. The question is whether our path would be a more fulfilling one for them. Because you know what? It may well not be, and that's okay. And I want to remind you of the readings that I suspect most of us did yesterday. That intention number 6, I've got here as my second to last bullet point. We literally honor the truths of the paths of people and other spiritual journeys. We did that on purpose. That's how we view this. God speaks to all of us. The Spirit is present in and among all of us. And we can listen in a lot of different languages. And in fact, I partly think that's why we as Catholics go grab all the good stuff from everybody else. It really amuses people when I confess, yes, in fact, we did borrow that from you. Thank you. Yes, in fact, that is very close to ancient Jewish practice. Thank you. We are perfectly willing to say, oh, that's pretty. I'm going to say that or do that. And we find ourselves enriched by reaching for those things and then finding the things that are actually nourishing for our actual congregation and our actual self. And we've been through all this received knowledge and all this exchanged knowledge. And this is the thing about synodal faith and faith that goes down to what does a community need, is that also means it goes down to what you as an individual need. And it's part of why we're so participatory. Because you got a Catholic you, and you got a Catholic your style, the thing that's going to actually build you. And we know that we Catholic better in groups. We know that sharing ideas and sharing encouragement helps us. And so we need to build a community that actually helps us. And then we need to make sure that the ECC is and remains a community of communities who help us. I'm going to find my cursor and stop share. Told you this was all really quick stuff for chapter 11. And I want to remind you of Philippians. And I didn't really want to put it up there because that's the work out your own salvation with fear and trembling thing. And it literally does say that. But you see, it also is in an epistle that does not come down on people. Philippians did not get a letter. Philippians got a letter. And so in context of that letter, and in Philippians 2, he's talking about how you've just kept going and you've done such a good job, even when I wasn't there. Keep doing that. And it's not whether you've got your salvation, it's working out how to live your salvation. And honestly, I pray that there are times when your encounters with God make your knees shaky. The only fear and trembling that I find from God is I really don't want to let Papa down. And those moments when awe washes over me. So with that awareness and how I've deconstructed that verse, it is on us to work out our own path of wholeness and holiness, hallowedness, with awe, and hopefully some fun. So let's talk about it.
And I'm going to pause our recording so that all of us feel free to talk with one another about our Catholic identity and everything that Father Mir has said.